Fake it till you make it. It's tired advice, but Garrison Courtney took it literally. Garrison was a real former DEA spokesperson. That part was true. Everything else about his life, though, was completely fabricated. He told at least a dozen companies that he was a covert CIA officer running a classified intelligence program. Obviously, the program didn't exist, except for maybe in his head. But the money these companies paid him was very, very real. $4.4 million real. But how did he get away with this? How did these companies fall for this con? Well, a true fact is that real intelligence agencies sometimes need commercial cover. A CIA officer working overseas might officially be employed by a private company. The company provides plausible reason for the officer to be in a foreign country. This is real. It happens. And Garrison exploited this fact. He approached defense contractors and technology companies with a proposition. He said, "I'm running a classified task force, and I need your company to hire me as an employee. On paper, I'll look like a regular consultant, but in reality, I'll be conducting covert intelligence work. And the government would award them contracts on the back end as a repayment for providing his cover." He presented it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. They would be supporting national security, and in exchange, they'd be rewarded with future business. And of course, the companies did their due diligence, or at least they thought they did. Of course, they asked questions, and they wanted some form of verification. And of course, Garrison was already a step ahead. When companies asked Garrison to verify his claims, he pointed them to government officials that he had been cultivating over the years. These were real people in high places, a lot of them working in the government, a lot of them that he knew from his DEA days. These officials didn't know that they were part of a con, though. Garrison had spent years building relationships and dropping little hints about his quote-unquote classified work. He never outright asked anyone to lie for him. Instead, he created impressions. He created a whole facade, an entire persona. He would mention that he was working on something sensitive or that he was involved in interagency matters. When a company later reached out to one of these contacts to ask about him, the response was often something vague, but validating enough. They would say something like, "I know Garrison. He's involved in some classified stuff, but I don't really know the details." That statement was enough. The official wasn't confirming anything specific, but a company trying to do due diligence on some CIA officer, it sounded like confirmation. Garrison also leveraged a fundamental awkwardness around classified stuff. If someone claims that their work is classified, how do you verify it? You can't just call the CIA and ask. There's no public directory of covert programs. The secrecy itself became a shield, and he reinforced that shield constantly. Garrison held meetings in sensitive compartmented information facilities, or SCIFs for short. These are rooms where classified briefings happen. They're mostly windowless, electronically shielded, and access restricted. He would arrange meetings at government facilities or defense contractor offices, claiming the discussion required a classified setting. He'd show up acting like he belonged. The people hosting these meetings assumed that someone had vetted him. After all, you don't just walk into a SCIF, except Garrison did, repeatedly. So by conducting meetings in these spaces, he borrowed their credibility. I mean, if we're talking in a SCIF, the thinking follows that this must be real. It was the setting that validated the lie. Garrison didn't just talk a good game. He created documentation to back it up. He produced fake non-disclosure agreements that companies signed before he would discuss his quote-unquote classified program. These NDAs served two purposes, though. First, they made everything feel official and real. Second, and more importantly, they prevented these companies from talking to each other. Each victim was isolated. No one could compare notes and realize that this covert CIA officer was running the same pitch on multiple companies at the same time. Garrison also created documents that appear to carry the signature of the U.S. Attorney General, lending federal authority to his fictional program. The letterhead looked right, the signatures seemed official, and why would anyone fake something this audacious? Also, when anyone got suspicious, he didn't retreat. He pushed back. A normal con artist might get defensive or make excuses when questioned. Garrison went on the offensive. He threatened people. If someone pushed too hard on verification, he'd warn them that they were jeopardizing a classified operation. He even went as far to threaten to have their security clearances revoked. He made suggestions that they could face criminal prosecution for potentially leaking classified information by even asking these questions. For people whose careers depended on maintaining a security clearance, which was most of his targets, these threats were terrifying. A revoked clearance doesn't just end one job, it ends your entire career. So people backed off. They stopped asking questions. They convinced themselves that Garrison must be legit because surely no one would be this brazen if they weren't. Each new company he added to his con bought him time and money, but he also made promises about government contracts that were supposed to materialize. So he needed new marks to pay the old ones and to keep the whole thing running. By the time he was arrested, he wasn't just running a $4.4 million scam anymore. Investigators discovered that he was working towards misappropriating over $3.7 billion in federal procurements. You see, Garrison had figured out a way to land himself a position at the National Institute of Health. This wasn't part of his cover story. It was an actual job that gave him access to sensitive procurement information. He used that access to identify upcoming contracts, and he tailored his pitches to companies hungry for government business. The whole thing was a house of cards, a web of lies. So what finally stopped him? How did his scheme finally come crumbling down? Someone finally verified. After years of successful deception, Garrison encountered people who called his bluff on threats and didn't take his credentials at face value. They pushed through the discomfort of questioning a classified program and discovered that there was nothing behind the curtain. Courtney's scheme works as a masterclass in social engineering because he understood psychology. People verify claims through networks of trust, but those trust networks can be manipulated. Here's 4 things that he executed perfectly. Number 1, he borrowed authority. He used secure facilities, real job titles from his past, and the opacity of classified programs to make his lies feel true. Every true detail made the false ones even more believable. Number 2, he manufactured validation. He didn't forge references, he cultivated them. Real government officials vouched for him without even realizing what they were vouching for. Companies doing their due diligence felt satisfied, even though they hadn't verified anything at all. Number 3, he weaponized secrecy. The NDAs just weren't legal cover. They isolated each victim, and the classified nature of the supposed program made normal verification feel impossible or even dangerous. And finally, number 4, he was aggressive. He used his aggression as a defense. When questioned, he aggressively pushed back. This flipped the power dynamic. Suddenly, the person asking questions was the one who felt like they'd done something wrong. In the end, Garrison Courtney was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. The companies that paid him learned something expensive. Confidence isn't clearance. And if someone responds to reasonable questions with threats, that's fear, not authority. Real authority doesn't need intimidation. This is one of those stories that just feels way too crazy to be real. But it actually happened. So my advice to you is to verify, verify, verify. And don't get got.